Hi, welcome to the Joyful House and welcome to Craft Table Talks. My name is Cynthia with Cynthia's Joyful Creations, and I'm glad you're here. Week after week, we are going to learn and explore new things in the craft of crocheting and knitting. I encourage you to ask questions or suggest topics that you would like to discuss or research further. Our time here around the craft table, it is for everyone, beginners and seasoned crafters. I am dedicating this time around the craft table to my sister Missy, who let me know that she was interested in learning how to crochet and knit. So I thank her for inspiring me to share what I can and bring some yarny inspiration and joy to you and all those who want to learn and refresh. So if you're ready, come join me for today's Craft Table Talks. Hello, welcome to the Joyful House and welcome to Craft Table Talks number 5. My name is Cynthia with Cynthia's Joyful Creations, and I will be your host today. And I am excited to share a little joy with you around the craft table. Let's take a look at the outline of all the things that we are going to discuss today at our Craft Table Talks. Today we're going to start with our table topic, and that is, what is a slip stitch and how do I use it? Then we're going to look at the abbreviation for a slip stitch, then identifying the front and back of a chain. Then we're going to look at working in the chain, how to actually make a slip stitch, and then the travel functionality of a slip stitch, where it is talking about the height, the turning chain, which is at the beginning and ending of a row, fastening off, and then we'll finally conclude with table chatter. Just a reminder, table chatter is an active way for you to participate in this live. I will either leave a question, a joke, or a word for you to respond to in a comment below. If it is a question, then I'm seeking for your answer to that question. If it is a joke, I'm looking for what you think the punchline is, and then I will reveal the punchline in our next live. And then if it is a word, I am wanting you to use that word in a sentence in your comment. If you do whatever that table chatter is, whether it's a question or a joke or a word, then you will earn an extra entry on the Tea Party giveaway wheel. Okay, if you're ready to get started, let's start off with our table topic. Today's table topic is, what is a slip stitch and how do I use it? Well, now that you have mastered the foundation chain that we did in Craft Table Talks number 4, you are ready to begin learning the basic stitches that make up all of your projects. There are 5 basic stitches. There is the slip stitch, the single crochet, the half double crochet, and treble crochet. We will go over all of those in the weeks to come, but today we're going to focus on the slip stitch. One thing that you will notice about the basic stitches is that they are oftentimes described by their height. Each stitch increases in height. Slip stitch is the smallest and treble crochet is the tallest. Now, with the slip stitch, it is the shortest of the stitches. It is one that is oftentimes actually considered more a technique than a stitch because it actually does not add any height to your project at all. Slip stitches, even though they are the shortest in the crochet stitches, oftentimes they are not worked in rows because they tend to make the fabric a little bit more dense. The tighter the stitch, the more dense your fabric is going to be. The larger the stitch, the more loose and flowing, more of a lacier effect your fabric will be. Also, the size of your hook and the size of your yarn can also affect the fabric as well. And we did go over hooks in Craft Table Talks number 2, and we went over yarn in Craft Table Talks number 3. And those are all located in a playlist on the channel, should you want to go back and look at them if you have not already. Okay, moving on, the slip stitch. We've already discussed that it is the shortest stitch of all the stitches, and most of the time it's commonly used in order to travel from one point in your crochet project to another. It also is used to join, especially if you're working in a round, and it is also used to end off a group of stitches at either the beginning or the end of your project. Now, before we head over to the craft table, let me just share with you that if you are using this stitch and you're following a pattern, and down the road we will look at patterns and how to read them. We will also look at all the different stitches and their abbreviations. We will do all of that, but I'm trying very hard to make sure that I'm navigating through a path of this course so that if you are a beginner crochet, that you can successfully get started, even if you don't have all the information, even if you don't have all the skills and the knowledge mastered yet. And then even for those of us that are a little bit more seasoned, sometimes we forget things, and it's great to have that reminder. The slip stitch in a pattern, the abbreviation for that is commonly most used is SL, ST. And you can see that on the screen. Sometimes it is often used in patterns as just a simple SS, but most times, more commonly, you will see it as SL, ST. Well, if you're ready, let's head on over to the craft table and let's learn how to make a slip stitch. See you at the craft table. To the craft table where the magic happens. As you can see, I have a foundation chain already made for you, and we went over how to do that in Craft Table Talks number 4. In this foundation chain, I have made a foundation chain of 11 chains, but before we begin even counting our chains or looking at how to insert the hook to begin making the slip stitch, I want to first give you some knowledge that is very valuable before you even begin creating your stitches. And that is how to tell the front side of a foundation chain from the back side. Now I'm going to slip a piece of paper underneath this so that you can see it a little bit easier. And I'm also going to remove the hook so that it doesn't roll for this demonstration. But where my finger is on this loop, that's where the hook would be. That's the loop on the hook. It never counts in our foundation chain. And then I'm going to hold right here below the slip knot. The slip knot also does not count as a chain in your foundation chain. And I have a picture on the screen for you where you can see that a little bit better. But this is the front side of your chain, and the way you can identify this is because it looks like a braid with a series of V stitches. And as you can see right here, it forms these nice little V stitches. Now if I turn this over to the back side, you can now see that our foundation chain has a vertical ridge of bumps. There's one, there's one, there's one. But you can see that it's a little bit harder to identify those chains, even with those vertical bumps. So it's always best when you're counting your chains to do it from the front side. Let's count our chains. Now again, I told you we had a foundation chain of 11, so we should have 11 chains. Remember, we never count the one that's on the hook. So this is going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11. Again, we never count the slip knot. Now you can also count the chains from the slip knot to the hook. Let's do it that way. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11. Now I do have a tip for you. When creating a long foundation chain, like if you were doing a blanket, you might have a foundation chain anywhere from 100 to 200, maybe even 300 stitches, depending on the size of the blanket or the garment that you're making. I always recommend about every 10 to 20 stitches, you put in a stitch marker, and that way if you lose your count, you can always go back and count by your stitch markers, whatever count number you decided to put it in at. So for example, I have this foundation chain of 11, so if I wanted to put a stitch marker in halfway through my foundation chain, I could put it in every 5 stitches. This is a type of stitch marker. There are all kinds of stitch markers. We will look more at accessories such as a stitch marker, the darning needle, all of that going forward in a future craft table talks. But if you were going to put a stitch marker in, you can count 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And when that stitch marker is in, I know every stitch marker represents 5 chains. If I've worked my stitches, I know that it represents every 5 stitches. So that's just a little tip that makes things a little bit more helpful and saving you from having to go back and recount a lot of chains. All right, well, once you've learned to work the beginning chain, then you're ready to begin making the stitches that are required for any project. These stitches are worked into the beginning chain. Now, one thing about your stitches is you will never work into the very first chain from the hook. All stitches will either be worked into the second, third, fourth, or depending on the pattern, a chain away from the hook. But you'll never work into this first chain. The reason is because you have to be able to create a beginning flow for your stitches. Otherwise, your project is going to look wonky on the sides. It's oftentimes what is referred to as a turning chain. And we talked about that a little bit last time in Craft Table Talks number 4 when we learned how to create the foundation chain. So you're never going to work into this first chain from the hook. Now, when working a stitch, you are going to insert the hook. Let me go ahead and put this back in. We can remove our paper now. And I'm going to tighten that loop down on the hook. And I just pulled that with what we call the yarn fingers or the yarn hand, and that means that it is holding the yarn that is attached to the skein. This is also referred to as the working yarn. And you can always loosen it by pulling it with the hook, and you can always tighten it by pulling it down. Okay. Now, when you go to work a stitch, you're always going to insert your hook from the front of the chain to the back, okay? So for example, once again, we don't work into this first chain from the hook. So we're going to work into this second chain. And if you look here, now if you'll notice, you've got a loop here you have a loop here. This is what is referred to as the front loop, because when you're holding your project, that is the loop that is facing you. That is your front loop. This is your back loop. And then on the back side, you have that third loop, and that is the bump that we were looking at before. And that's referred to as the back bump. Now, you want to take your hook and you want to insert from the front to the back. And if you do that, you'll see on my hook, I have that V-stitch that we talked about earlier when we were counting our chain. Okay. Now, when it comes to foundation chains and stitches, depending on the project, some people will go only under the back loop so that it creates a little bit of a thicker foundation here for putting on a border. And I'm going to zoom in just a little bit so you can see a little bit more. So see how it gives you the two loops at the bottom? But most times people go under both of the loops. There is no right or wrong way. So once you've done that, once you've inserted your hook from the front to the back, you then want to create your stitch. But before we actually do that, I want to also share that once you get your first stitch in, you are then going to work your stitches down the rest of the row. And when you finish, you're going to have one less stitch than you had chains. Because remember, we don't work into the first chain, we worked into the second. Now, if I work into the third chain, then that means I'll have 2 stitches less than chains. So instead of having 11 chains, I would have 9 stitches. If I work into that third loop, then I will only have 8 stitches. Okay? All right, so how to make a slip stitch. Let's put our hook back in. And I also want to remind you that when working on your foundation chain, sometimes it's hard to get started just simply because you have nothing to hold on to. Okay, so sometimes you have to just firmly hold on to your foundation chain with your yarn hand to hold that tension. But once you get something worked up and start going, you'll have something to hold on to and it will get easier. All right, so to get started with a slip stitch, we're going to go into the second chain from the hook. So 1, 2, we're going to go from the front to the back. All right, just like that. We've got the loop on our hook, and then we've got the first chain, and you can see that V-stitch there. And we're going to wrap the yarn around the hook. That is called a yarn over. Okay, so we're going to yarn over, and then we're going to just simply turn that hook down so that we can pull that loop through. Okay, and when we do, you'll see now we have 2 loops on the hook. All right, to complete the slip stitch, you're then going to pull the loop that you just created through the loop that is on the hook. So just like that. And that is your first slip stitch. Let's do it again. We're going to insert our hook. I'm going to go under both those loops, those top loops. I'm going to yarn over. So, and as you get a little bit more experience, you can just use your fingers to yarn over. Then you're going to pull that loop through You've got 2 loops on the hook. Then you're going to pull that loop that you created through the loop that's on the hook. There is your second slip stitch. Now, you can see these stitches are very, very tiny, okay? So when you do work a slip stitch, you do want to work it a little bit loosely because of the fact that they are so short. They'll be difficult to work into if they are too tight. All right. Now, another thing I want to share with you as we begin making stitches, if you're right-handed, then you're going to work your row from the right to the left. But if you're left-handed, you're going to work your rows from the left to the right. All right. And also on your foundation chain, your chain stitches will stretch as you work through them. Let's make another one. And as you can see, it's hard to hold on to it because there's not a lot to hold on to. But the more we do, the easier it will get. So let's insert our hook from the front to the back. All right, we're going to yarn over, pull that loop through, and then pull the loop we just made through the loop on our hook. And we have created another slip stitch. Now, again, this is a very short stitch, so it's very hard to hold on to. Now I'm going to show you how to make the slip stitch in one movement. We've been doing it in 2. I'll do it in 2 one more time, and then I'll show you how to do it in one movement. So insert your hook from the front to the back, yarn over and pull that loop through. That's one step. The second step is to pull the loop I just made through the one on my hook. And that is the second step. And again, I've made another slip stitch. And again, you can see how dense this fabric is forming because that stitch is so short. All right, now let me show you how to complete the slip stitch in one movement. Insert from the front to the back, yarn over, pull my loop through, and then just keep on pulling it through. I'm going to do it again. Insert from the front to the back, yarn over, pull up my loop, and then just pull it all the way through. And it's not pulling through. Oh, because I was holding the yarn back here. All right, so let's do this again. And I won't hold the yarn this time. So from front to back, yarn over, and pull all the way through. And this is what you call a slip stitch. Again, it is very seldom worked across a row like this. Most of the time it is used to get from one place to the other or to join in a round. And I'm going to show you all of that. So let me continue making slip stitches down the rest of this row. And as I do that, let me just tell you that as we move forward, there will be stitches that will be what is considered a combination of stitches. So you might make a slip stitch and a single crochet, or a single crochet and a slip stitch to create a pattern. There is so much diversity of stitches that can be created with these basic stitches that we are going to be learning. So that is a completed row of slip stitches. Now, this is what we referred to last week as the turning chain. So for me to be able to start on the next row, I have to yarn over and pull through that loop that was on the hook. And some actually refer to that as a slip stitch. So that's what we also count, or we called when we said that a slip stitch can be at the beginning and the end of a row. Some refer to it as a slip stitch, some refer to it as a turning chain. But once I've created it, I can then turn my work, and now I can begin working on the second row. So you see my foundation chain is my beginning chain, but that first row we created, that is actually our first row, not our second row. But now we're going to start our second row. Now the thing with slip stitches, and I'm going to put a chart up on the screen here, it shows you how many turning chains you have to have in order to begin making a particular stitch. Now, if you're looking at that chart, it says 0 chains for a slip stitch. That is correct. But if you are making a project, as we are today, of just slip stitches, which again, this is very uncommon, okay? But today we're doing it because I'm showing you how to make a slip stitch. We have to chain 1 in order to increase the height of our row. But in general, if you're using a slip stitch to join in a circle, you do not have to chain 1. And I will show you how to do that. All right, but for now, let's continue making slip stitches and building a project. Now, I am going to go right into this first stitch. Now, I know on the foundation chain, we skipped that. But you see this chain 1 that I did right here, that counts as the first chain that we skipped. So because I have this chain 1, I can work this slip stitch right into the first one. Now, I've done mine really tight, and I did that for a reason, because I wanted you to see how difficult it is to get into those stitches if we make them really tight. I got under one loop, but I am still trying to work under both those loops. But on this row, we're going to make them a little bit looser, so when we get to the third row, we don't have this kind of issue. So I'm going to kind of use my fingers to get in there because I've made it so tight. But again, I did that on purpose just for showing you. So when I make this one, I'm going to pull that, and I'm going to make sure that this slip stitch is a lot looser. See right there how I can easily go through that stitch because I made that a lot looser. And you want to do that as well when you're using it to join your projects in a round or anytime you do it, because a lot of times you will work into those slip stitches. Sometimes you won't. It all depends on the pattern, but the pattern will let you know. So we're going to go into this next one. And again, remember that this has a lot to do with the fact that this is a very short stitch. You'll see things differently next time when we work on the single crochet. It won't be near as bad because it'll be a little bit taller stitch. All right, I'm going to go into this next one. And again, I'm going from the front to the back, yarning over, pulling that loop through, and then pulling it through the loop on the hook. And you can already begin to see how these are worked a little bit looser. All right, let's do the next one. And again, to work it loosely, I'm pulling this loop here that I'm creating up a little bit higher. And that's what helps make that be a looser stitch. There you go. So when we get to our next row, it won't be quite as tough because we've made them looser. And again, normally you do not use slip stitches as the base of your stitch pattern for your projects.
But just a reminder today we are, because we're just learning how to even create slip stitches. And again, we insert the hook from front to back, pull that loop through, and then pull it through the one on the hook. We've got one more to do, and then I'm going to show you on the next row how much easier it is because I made them a lot looser. All right, so let's begin our next row. And you can see because I made those a lot looser, it's a lot easier to go into those stitches. Also, you are creating a little bit more to hold on to, so it's easier to grip it and control the hook through the stitches. So again, we go through the front to the back, yarn over, pull that loop through, and pull it all the way through the loop on the hook. And one thing that you're also seeing is how dense this fabric is becoming. Okay. So see how thick that is? That's because there's no height to those stitches. They're very closely made. It's a very short stitch, so it makes it very thick and very dense. All right, I'm going to pull this out so I can show you how to use a slip stitch to join in a round. So I'm just going to make a very quick foundation chain. And it doesn't really matter how many chains. I just want enough to be able to demonstrate. Okay, we're going to stop there. Now, let me show you how to use a slip stitch to join in a round. So if I want this to, instead of going, straight across, back and forth, if I want it to create a circle like this, then I have to join it with a slip stitch. And you do it the same way we did in previously. You're going to come into the front of your work and go to the back. But if I want to join it into a circle, that means I want to join this end to this end. So I'm going to come to this very end stitch, chain, and I'm going to put my hook in from the front to the back, just like I did before. I'm going to yarn over, and I'm going to pull that loop through, and then I want to complete my slip stitch and pull it through the loop on the hook. And now I've created a round. I've joined this with a slip stitch to create the round. Now I want to show you, so we've talked about the travel functionality of a slip stitch from the height, the turning chain at the beginning and ending of a row. And we want to finish up today with how to use that to fasten off. So I am going to pause this for a moment, and I'm going to work up a little piece so I can show you how to fasten off. I have a piece of worked fabric for you, and at this point we are done with our project and we're ready to fasten off. Now, of course, your project will more than likely be bigger than this, and it will either be, a dishcloth or a blanket or a garment or an amigurumi toy or whatever your project is. Fastening off is the same for any project or any stitch. So we're going to go ahead and learn that technique today. Now, unlike a knitted fabric, crochet stitches cannot unravel in the vertical direction. Okay? However, they will work loose one by one across the row if the work falls off the hook or if it's not fastened off once complete. Let me show you what I mean. If my hook is no longer there, look how easy it is for my stitches to come apart. So now let me put those stitches back in real quickly, so I can show you how to fasten off properly. Now, over time, as you become more experienced, or maybe you are already a seasoned crocheter, you have your own way of fastening off, but I'm going to show you two ways that are most common. Now, the first way is, first, we need to cut our project from our working yarn. So we're just going to snip some off there. You want to make sure that you leave a tail long enough to weave in afterwards, because that's a whole nother thing. Now, you can use your hook or you can use your finger to fasten off. Let me show you how to use the hook first. This is how I typically fasten mine off. You want to slip stitch or chain one, however you want to look at it, by just yarning over and pulling that yarn through that loop that is on your hook. And then you're going to pull it all the way through. And then when you do that, it is knotting it off and you want to tighten it. Now, I don't want to tighten this just yet because I want to show you another way. If that doesn't seem easy for you, then I'll show you a different way, but I'm going to show you how to do it with the hook one more time. So I've got the last working loop. Notice I said working loop. It doesn't count on my hook. I'm going to yarn over and pull that yarn through. Let me do it one more time since my hook came out of the loop. Yarn over and just pull that yarn through, and then I would tighten it down. Now, if it's not easy for you to do it with the hook, let me show you how to do it with your fingers. All right. Before you take your hook off of the loop, pull that loop so that you've got enough of a loop that your fingers can work through. And after you've cut your yarn, then just simply put your fingers through the loop, grab that yarn, pull it through, and tighten it. And it does the same thing. Once it's tightened, and let's go ahead and tighten it down, then look at that. It does create a little bit of a knot, okay? But if you work a border or if you weave it in, you're not going to feel that knot. All right, that is fastened off. And then you would weave in your ends, but I'm going to save that for another Craft Table Talks down the road. And that is our lesson for today on a slip stitch. I hope that you have found this to be very informative and helpful. Before we head out today, it is time for our table chatter. Again, a reminder that this is a time for you to be interactive with me and the channel by either answering the joke or the question, or using the word provided in a sentence in a comment below. And again, if you do that, you will gain an extra entry on the giveaway wheel. Okay. Last time we were together, your joke was, why did the crocheter love the beginning of every project? And today I will reveal the answer to you. Excited to see your answers and what you think the answer to today's table chatter joke is. I hope that you've enjoyed today. I hope you feel a little bit more confident about your knowledge of what a slip stitch is and your skill set on how to make one.
Until next time, be joyful, stay crafty in your own way, make your own joyful creations, and be the joy in everything you do. And I will see you next time. Bye.